Black Lives Matter, which is what this movement is supposedly about, should be an honorable movement. And so, Zach, I guess if you want to put up the screen one more time, here's their actual website. This is the What We Believe page of the Black Lives Matter website. And let me scroll down a little bit. And basically they've got, I have to find it. Sorry, here we are. This, near the top. We are unapologetically Black in our positioning. In affirming that Black Lives Matter, we need not qualify our position. To love and desire freedom and justice for ourselves is a prerequisite for wanting the same for others. I'm on board with that. That seems acceptable to me, especially the first sentence. We are unapologetically Black in our positioning. It's Black Lives Matter, as it should be. But they're lying. This isn't what they then do. Look down this list and find that we have, oh goodness, where? Yeah. No, it's up here. We make space right below this, close to the top of the list. We make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folks, especially Black trans women. Again. And then the next one, we build a space that affirms Black women. Final in a list of 3, when women make up half of the population and actual trans people make up a tiny, tiny fraction of 1%. And then finally, we make our spaces family friendly and enable parents to fully participate with their children. Awesome. Oops. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that's referring to, but the very next one is we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages. How?
Wait, keep going.
They collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable.
Mothers, parents, and children. A phrase a number of people have pointed out is carefully constructed to exclude fathers. Yeah. They could be included under parents, but they are not specifically labeled there for a reason.
And the idea that dismantling the nuclear family is in any way centering Black lives, when it's so clearly destructive of all lives, but actually, historically, and right now specifically destructive of Black lives in America, shows that this is not what it seems.
Yeah.
So you can take it off.
It's not what it seems. So, there is a lot to the question of what trans is doing here and why Black trans women is playing the specific role that it is. So conspicuously, Evergreen was not a especially diverse campus racially. Right. Yeah. It had only 4,000 students total. Mm-hmm. The protest involved a couple hundred people who were very actively involved. 3 leaders, maybe the 3 leaders,
of maybe 8 leaders, right? Maybe.
And I would say
there weren't a couple hundred leaders.
I would say the 3 leaders who showed up again and again were Black trans women.
The term that at least 2 of them used for themselves were Black trans femmes.
Black trans femmes. So anyway, there's just something demographically conspicuous about that, right? There's something about people who are born male, who transition to female, and are Black, who are somehow at the very forefront of this movement, despite their tiny, tiny numbers. This is to the exclusion, even to the extent that there's all of this very positive sounding language about supporting these trans people. This is also to the exclusion of trans people who aren't Black, and it is to the exclusion of trans men who are born female and
to male.
Transition male. So in some sense, one of the things that's going on here is that there's a trick of the mind, right? To say we are protecting Black trans women. Women is a protected class because women have a built-in disadvantage, at least strength-wise and also historically power-wise. So people who are born into that advantage and then move into a protected class are a phenomenon we have to talk about, right? What is the proper mental reaction to this, right? Is it to take the protections that we ordinarily reserve for women and to give them to anyone born male who simply says, you know what, I'm female? And if so, do you expect anybody to take advantage of that opportunity who is not doing so on the basis that they are internally of this mindset? So I would also.
There will, of course, there will be people who take advantage, and of course, if there is no hurdle to be jumped beyond claiming now I'm a woman, of course, there will be people who game that, and we have seen it.
Yep. I would also point out that there was a gigantic rally in New York. I can't remember if I showed it on the
I don't think you did.
podcast, but there was a gigantic rally in New York, and basically, as far as I can tell, second to the hashtag Black Lives Matter in terms of the protest priorities was Black Trans Lives Matter was the hashtag.
Yep.
And so why, if the idea is that this is all people who face oppression, why would you limit that to Black trans lives? Why wouldn't it just be Trans Lives Matter as a fellow traveler?
And honestly, I mean, if we were to take them at their word and say that this is an objection to police brutality and the continuing injustices in the courts and certainly historically racially unjust laws, which demographic within Black people has suffered the most? It's young Black men. Right? It's young, Black women, like all Black people have suffered at the hands of racist ideologies in certainly historical and to some extent modern US. But who has suffered the most within Black people? It's Black men. And why then? Why then are we talking? Why then are they focused on a demographic that is so tiny and so new, that actually has a history with policing and the courts that can't probably extend back even into the 20th century.
So at some level, it has something to do with the fact that, this mentality, this intersectional mentality creates an unassailability, right? The unassailability appends to the number of categories that you can add together that you can say are having an emergent effect. And there's, we were talking earlier about the fact that these words don't function like normal words, that they actually function like mechanisms that force you into acknowledgement that the whole slate of claims is right. And, this is another set. Like, how do you wade into these waters about transness? I mean, we're watching, J.K. Rowling get into very hot water for saying very reasonable things about the need to continue to protect women, and that transness does not invalidate that need. So anyway, the waters are so fraught that nobody can figure out how to navigate them, which is creating a juggernaut.
Well, it doesn't strike me as any sort of a concerted conspiracy, but the ability for people to make the claim that they were trans, absent intention or actual follow-through with regard to hormonal or surgical modification and obvious gender dysphoria, body gender dysphoria, and having most of the liberal intelligentsia and mainstream media and academia say, "Oh, of course, if you say so, yes," was, even if not part originally of the movement that became Black Lives Matter, certainly it is clear that Black Lives Matter observed that and said, that worked. What is it that we can do that can get people to roll over and accept these things that sound like if you don't agree with them, you must be a nasty human being? That's how it's being done right now. Because although until 10 years ago, no one had ever heard of transphobia, and in fact, transphobia is not what it sounds like. But no one wants to be called a racist. No one wants to be called a misogynist. No one wants to be called a transphobe, except transphobe is so clearly not what it means. It doesn't have the historical manifestation that racism does. And so people at first like, "Oh, I am? Oh, gosh, that's terrible. I don't, but I have compassion for trans people." And of course, what transphobia, at the point that you're accused of transphobia, often what it means is that you are making the, apparently outrageous, but actually biologically real and foundational claim that sex is real and that we have an uninterrupted history of sexual dimorphism and sexual reproduction for 500 million years. That's what I mean when I say sex is real, and that is the moment when I have been called a transphobe.
Well, transphobe is a tripwire. It's not a word, it's a tripwire. And there are several of them. Transphobe is anything that suggests any kind of skepticism about any claim made within a half a mile of transness of any kind. You've got TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, which is the claim that you are, in fact, some kind of you are pushing some kind of aggressive ideology to have any doubt at all that all protections normally awarded to women should be necessarily awarded to men who transition to female,
which includes, not just a fully transitioned trans woman. What is her situation with regard to public bathrooms? And I say fully transitioned in contrast to someone who's put on a dress and declared that because they like the color pink, they're a woman, because no, they're not. But all the way over here to, if you've declared yourself a woman, you get to compete against women in sport.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, that is the reversal of the honest and wonderful part of Title IX. Like, Title IX happened in order to allow women to compete in sport and to get some funds to do so. And allowing men who've declared themselves women, even if they've been on hormones, if they went through development as men, they should not be competing against women in sport. They shouldn't be. It's not fair.
Yeah. And it is the backdoor uninvention of legal structures designed to protect a class. It's the unprotection of a class of people who were protected for, in this case, physical reasons.
Now, you just said to me yesterday about the intentional unprotection of the unhooking of some legal structures in California. What was this?
Geez. It was, now I don't know how serious this effort is, but there was there is a ballot proposition to remove the prohibition against discrimination based on race, sex,
gender identity.
So that obviously opens a frightening door. But before we leave the trans question, so you've got transphobe, kind of all purpose. You've got TERF. You've got trans medicalist and trans scum, which as far as I can tell are synonymous. I don't know why they haven't settled.
Trans medicalist and trans scum. Well, it's like Chop and Chaz.
It's like Chop and Chaz. There's an inability to resolve even the label on these things meaningfully. But what that one means is that if you are a person who believes that true transness requires dysphoria, then you are also of some sort of radical belief system, and that really there is no threshold that would define the difference between true trans and anything else. And the real point is, look, you could make all these arguments, but what's really being said is you are not under any circumstances allowed to make any counter argument or express any skepticism. And this is going to be a hallmark of this entire movement.